Hello. Welcome back to episode number 5 of the Get Invested podcast. I am, again, your co-host, Jordan, and that guy on the screen over there is Matthias. And for the audio listeners, you'll just have to imagine him on the screen if you dare. All right. Today, we are jumping back into a little bit more specific to the business subject. We're going to talk about choosing a market, not where to shop for groceries, where we think there's likely good opportunities to invest in real estate and all the ways in which what that statement actually means. What does it mean to say, oh, it's a good opportunity, it's a good place to invest in real estate? How do we make those kind of decisions? We're going to get into some of the major factors there in that today. And we're going to start with the one that probably drives the train, if you will, but at the same time has so many different factors in it that kind of tail out to all kinds of other things that are going on. So it's a great place to start, and that is job growth. So Matthias, let's talk about how we look at job growth statistics, trends, etc., before jumping in and investigating an area.
Yeah. So when we're starting to look at a city or even a part of that city to figure out if it's a place we want to invest in, obviously job growth is probably the number one factor because it leads to all the other growth that we care about. Job growth leads to population growth because people are moving in to take those jobs as they are created, and then obviously as they move in, they have to live somewhere. So the rent growth is due to demand increasing over time. So just like anywhere else in the U.S., places can't keep up with populations. Like you can only build houses so fast, build houses and apartments so fast. So that's why we have such big rent growth in these markets that are really growing fast. So really, there's a whole bunch of different ways that we can check and see what the job growth data is for any given area. But basically, we want it to be beating the national average, and we want it to be beating the average of around its state, basically. So, and it could be beating it by a little, could be beating it by a lot. And all these numbers I'm not going to use any specific numbers because it really varies depending on the place. So basically, we want it to be the highest job growth in its immediate area. So if there's like a Twin Cities area, you don't necessarily get a distinction between the Twin Cities. So you know what I mean? You would invest in the one that is beating its neighbor, basically, that kind of thing. So when we are figuring out what market to go with, that's where we start. And how you prove or demonstrate job growth, because it's always a past stat, right? So hey, this is how the jobs have been growing over the past X amount of time. We want to look at kind of the environment the business environment in that area. So the job growth could have been good, but if there's no more companies, no more hiring, it could all stall out. So basically, another strong component of the job growth is the actual business friendly environment of the town. Are they attracting new companies to come and build factories or plants or warehouses or whatever, what have you? Kind of that we want to see that in a market as well.
So let's backtrack a little bit. That was a lot of different things one time. So talk a little bit about this balance that you're talking about with like job growth versus new build, and like what that tells you. Because we're investing in existing places, right? So what's the calculation there?
So I mean that also plays into just basically general regions that I like to invest in. So like you've got your Dallases, your Atlantas, your Miamis, places that are growing huge, that have huge job growth. Everybody's moving. Well, actually, Atlanta's slowed down a little bit, but basically, there's those markets where the job growth is good and the demand is going to be high. However, like I said, everybody knows that, so they're building like crazy apartments and properties all over in all those places. So because that's where the big money targets, they know they're going to get the bang for the buck. When they develop huge apartment complexes there. So we got to try to find that sweet spot where they're growing at a good place, but it's still almost under the radar a little bit in terms of you don't have big New York money coming in to kind of develop, and we want to stay away from where they're attracted to, because then that could blow up an investment, right? If somebody builds a brand new apartment complex right across the street from something that we've bought, then that could really cause a problem. Like, why would I know if there's a brand new apartment complex across the street at comparable pricing? Why would I live in the old one on our side of the street? So we want to avoid that. There's terms for markets. It's called primary, secondary, and tertiary markets. A primary would be like those the Miami, the New York, the LA, the huge cities. Secondary would be those like one step down. I think Charlotte's considered a secondary market. Tallahassee. Some of these places like that.
Okay, don't stop. I'm going to stop you right there. Don't put us in the same category as Tallahassee. Come on.
Look,
it's just rude.
They're not comparable in anything but size, okay? And
I don't think
Charlotte's
there's
probably significantly bigger.
Size, but yeah.
Either way.
So
go ahead.
What I'm hearing is, so you're saying tertiary, which is kind of, I mean, from what I've been seeing and, just being a news junkie and reading everything, like, tertiary markets in a lot of ways are very exciting because it's almost like a new way of thinking about economic growth, because it used to always just be, oh, you got to move to the big city. And now it's just, or you got to be in a suburb of the big city. And now that's just really not the case, especially with telecommunication and post-COVID remote work and everything else. So, I mean, having lived in a lot of, I guess, tertiary markets, being a college professor and stuff, can be a pretty good life. So it's kind of interesting that job growth is going to be connected so specifically to, I mean, you're looking for a different lifestyle at the same time. But before we jump into that, I did want to ask, are there any sectors that you get particularly excited about the growth? Like, what industries or sectors of the economy do you get the most excited about when you see there's growth in that area?
The sectors that I'm most excited about are the ones that are harder to move on from. Right. So for instance, down throughout the South, they're building a whole bunch of like vehicle auto factories where they're making cars. And like, that is hugely expensive to move and, takes years and years to start up. So when I hear that those places or those companies are moving into an area, I know, okay, that's like 10 plus years of reliable jobs in there. Even in a downturn, they may lay off some workers in a big recession, but you're still, it's astronomically expensive to move or change those things. So that's not something that's going to happen quickly or lightly. I like hearing that like car manufacturers are moving in. I like hearing that same with like we're on the coast, so a lot of ship yards, ports. Like for instance, in Savannah, the place we've recently invested in, they're expanding the port there and they're putting cruise lines in there. They're like, that's huge. That's a gazillion jobs, and it's not something that's cheaply going to change. You know what I mean? So that's long term. That kind of stuff really is exciting for a market.
Because Savannah has like the port of Georgia, right? Like that is their big port. Yeah.
And now they're going to add cruise ships in there, as if it wasn't busy enough. They're just going to add to it, but they're expanding the port too. So, why not?
Right. So they're expanding their port, not just for the tourism of the cruise ships, but that's going to be part of it. I'm assuming they had to make it bigger.
They had to go deeper. I think that a lot of the barges don't draw as much as the cruise ships.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then of course, if people are coming in to get on a cruise ship or people are getting off a cruise ship, then like, you've got opportunities for the hospitality industry. Yeah.
Exactly.
I would imagine hospitality is one that definitely is kind of on the other end of that scale. They tend to follow more of those kind of hard industries. I know another big thing down here is healthcare. People building big
hospital
healthcare
system.
facilities.
You're like,
yeah.
Thousands and thousands of jobs. And in, the surrounding area, there's all the support that, because basically you got to build restaurants, you got to build houses, you got to build all these things for all those workers and the primary job. But now there's all sorts of jobs springing up to support and service those workers that are coming in for the big system. So it really blossoms an area whenever they get a big project like that. So those anchors are really good to have in the markets we have. Like Hattiesburg is a big hospital system. There's universities; those are nice to have because those ain't changing quickly either. Military bases are nice too because that's like it's like 15-year process to close down a base, and you're going to know about it. So military doesn't really lay off people or stop paying them. So that's a good. I don't mind having military renters. Also, I was in the military. I don't know if you remember.
I think it comes up on occasion.
Yeah,
on occasion. Well, so it's. So it seems like, I mean, the things we can get excited about are, I would say tech is another one that didn't come up, but the same kind of thing. Charlotte's definitely benefited from that, and especially since, there's such a big connection between finance and tech. It's those jobs that are going to require other jobs to sustain it. I mean, you have everything from, you're going to need a mechanic, and there's going to need to be a car dealership, and then there's going to need to be, cool places to go, etc.
Restaurants.
Okay, so yeah, exactly. These days, breweries. That actually takes me to the next question, though, because on the idea of breweries, this is kind of a cultural shift, right? That we didn't used to have them, and it was like you went to a restaurant, or maybe you go to a bar, and a lot of people went to it. That was kind of like you were a bar goer or you were not a bar goer, especially in the South, at least. Let's be real about what we're talking about. But now with breweries, it's so it seems like definitely what we're looking for are job growth sectors that, by their very nature, are going to either support existing or bring in other sectors of the economy. They're going to jobs that create other jobs. Exactly. If you are a tech company or a car company or anything like that, those people need grocery stores. They need car mechanics. They need someplace to buy cars. Well, I guess maybe they buy them from the manufacturer. I don't know. Anyways, you see my point. Like, they need cool places to go, cool places to hang out, right? Their kids got to be able to do things. They need go to eat, maybe. And get a drink maybe. And obviously any place that's trying to be cool these days, and I'm not knocking this because I'm a big fan of it, probably going to have a brewery or two. And actually, on the note of breweries, that actually is an excellent segue into my next question, because we already kind of brought up that there's like a connection between our investment, the job, and like what is around the job. And breweries is one of those kind of interesting cultural shifts where used to, a lot of people didn't drink out. They might drink at home, or they might drink a little bit at a restaurant, or some people would go to a bar, but down south, a lot of people wouldn't. But now, with all the different ways in which we have these different markets, for instance, and the different kinds of ways people are building these communities, and just the big, huge explosion of breweries, the idea of drinking and who you drink with and et cetera is really changing, right? Like, if you go to a brewery now, there's going to be whole families. They're going to be getting lunch too. Dogs going to be running around. There's all kinds of things happening. There's sports to play. I mean, low level, right? Cornhole. Have you seen this like soccer pool thing? That's the new one. Anyways, my point is, those are all cultural shifts. Okay, we'll come back to that. Those are all kind of cultural shifts. So when we're looking at job growth, that obviously means population growth, which would fall under the category of demographics. Is there any kind of combo of the two that is the best indication of a good investment? Like, are we looking for specific age ranges? Are we looking for specific mixes of types of age ranges, or family, single? What is that in any way a factor?
So in determining a neighborhood to invest in, yes, 100%. So like, right, so we've selected we talked about job growth. So okay, these cities or tertiary markets that are attracting job growth, big jobs. Now we can narrow it down a little bit, and like we'd love to be in a neighborhood around the corner from a brewery or a park or someplace where, and depending on what type of apartment it is, if we're buying one that has a lot of 2 and 3 bedroom units, we're thinking families, right? So now we want to be looking at things to do for the family. Is it near, like, a good school? Schools are very important when we're talking families as well, because people move to an area, literally a neighborhood of a town, for the school. So if they want to be in the best school. So obviously, when we start getting down to neighborhoods, we start looking at those anchors. Like, hey, do they have a good supermarket there? Is it just a Dollar General that they have to go to, or is there like depending on the region, is it a Publix or something? Walmarts are good to have because everybody goes to Walmart for random things that they need, including groceries as well. So we like having those staple items near to the property. So exactly like you said, those things are all indicators that we look for in a micro sense, in terms of, okay, we've identified Hattiesburg. Why do I want to be in Southwest Hattiesburg? Well, it's because the commute is good to all the jobs. Schools are great there. It's quiet, it's rural without being far away from everything. They have all the good neighborhood chains around the corner. Voila, that's why. Well,
so that didn't really answer my question about demographics, though. Like, so we're looking more at the property than we are like guessing about kind of what kind of people are moving in. That sounded bad. You know what I mean? Like what they're going to
The
want kind of people.
Yeah, so that it will depend on the property. So if like I said, if I'm buying a 2 and 3 bedroom one that has, if it has a lot of 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, maybe that's more appealing to young professionals versus families. You know what I mean? So I'm going to care. Hey, if I'm buying a 1 and 2 bedroom apartment place, I want it to be closer to a brewery or bars or the nightlife because that's where young professionals like to go. Vice maybe and I care less about how good the schools are. I still care, but maybe less. But then if it's 2 and 3 bedrooms where it's going to be a lot of families, now I start caring a lot more about the schools and about the parks and things like that. Because in the end, I want to not only do I want to buy in a market, I want to buy the best product in a market, right? The one where I think I get the most value for the cost. So those things all come into play.
I mean, it would seem like that if we're looking at a place that has well, actually, you know what? I'm going to back off on that point. I was going to say that the type of industry might indicate the type of, whether it be single or families or what kinds of things they might be looking for. It might drive that, but honestly that's not necessarily the case, because any of these big operations are going to have the need for all kinds of jobs within that to make it run. I mean, there's going to be all kinds of complex organizational situations that
in the case of the big auto manufacturer, I don't necessarily need to target those auto manufacturer jobs, those workers in those jobs, because I just need to know that they're there because of all the, what I mean? I can target whoever I want to target in that market because of the existence of those jobs. So that's kind of less important what the industry is in terms of for those specific workers.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Well, on the, we've already brought up the primary, secondary, and tertiary markets. And I mean, as much as I think it's kind of hard to get my head around the fact that the 15th largest city in the United States is a secondary market, we're really trying to focus less on the Queen City and more on those tertiary markets. So there's got to be a sweet spot there, right? Because you're talking about a place that big money's not focused on. There's not a lot of players in the game. Maybe people aren't really paying attention to it because they haven't seen the potential that is there for growth. But there's got to be some kind of sweet spot, right? Like you can't just move into a place that's like, well, pretty sure in 5 years there's going to be stuff here. Like there's already got to be some stuff there, right? You're not going to be like the only game in town. So how do we balance that act?
That is a tough thing to do. I mean, it has to be kind of in the beginning stages of the noticeable tertiary markets, where I think, this is what happened to Huntsville, Alabama, right? Big tech, big space, NASA, all that stuff there. It started, and then the investing was really, really good for a long time in there until it kind of got out. And now, even though Huntsville, Alabama is a tertiary market, it got way overbuilt because we found out about it, right? And so all the big money from all the big hedge funds came in. So we need to like get in there earlier, I guess, to a tertiary market. But also, like you said, there has to actually be inventory. We can't just go buy the apartment complex in this village somewhere. Like there is a balance to that. And honestly, it becomes a factor in terms of the loans that we qualify for. The best terms on loans are offered to those primary market properties. So you do take a hit. You don't get as good at terms like, a slightly higher interest rate or even a slightly higher criteria for debt covering the debt. Like they want you to make more money on top of whatever you're going to owe for the principal and interest the smaller the market goes, just to protect, because they deem it riskier in a smaller market. So all these things come into play. You want to be able to have enough properties to target. So like, really 100,000 people within a few miles of the center. That's kind of like the base starting point, because you can't go much smaller than that without, I mean, maybe if you're focused on a market and there's like a little village on the outside in the path of progress, be interested, that you're assuming is going to be built up soon. That's about as far out as you can go in terms of like into smaller towns. It's hard to get things to make sense any smaller than that.
So, yeah, I mean, well, the shocking thing is that we're such a big country, and I mean that quite literally. Like there's so much land. We're really spread out. This came into real big focus now that I just spent the last 2 weeks in the United Kingdom, because you get like 10 miles outside of a city area and it's just fields. And then there's like little hamlets that there's not going to be. We couldn't even buy the one apartment complex. There's not one. There's like eight
Yeah.
houses or whatever, and the one pub or whatever. And I'm sure we missed some of the houses, but for us, there's so many places where there are 100,000, somewhere between 50 to 100,000 people. Right? You're
Yep.
about to go to my hometown of Asheville. Asheville's not even 100,000, but a place that people know, a place that people go. It's got all kinds of cool factor. So, which is, I think one of the things that's one of the things we've been talking about, right? In a tertiary market has to have a cool factor, I feel like, of some sort.
People have to want to live there. It has to be someplace that you'd want to live.
Right. I just want to bring this up since he brought up the number of 100,000. The population of Tallahassee is actually 200,000. So they just made it. To put too fine a point on this whole Tallahassee to Charlotte comparison, we're like 1.5 million. Anyways, okay, moving on. You also, I would imagine this sweet spot has to have multiple offerings of apartments so that you can stand out, right? Because one of our goals is to provide quality at market rate, but not extortionary. Do a good job running the property and go kind of be a standard leader in that middle range. So if we can't distinguish ourselves from other places, does it really work? We just
No, I mean that's the goal, right? Is to be the best provider. That we want everybody to want to live in our properties. You know, we provide the best housing at the at the best affordable rates and in the best neighborhoods, the best areas of town that you would want to be and hang out in.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I mean, I think that's one of the things that has been kind of tangentially mentioned, maybe tertiarily mentioned, that we have an objective in this investment, and of course making money for our investors and getting people building their own personal wealth and their family's wealth is a big part of that, but it's also the product we want to produce. So if we're investing long term, right, we're going to look at it a little bit differently than if we're investing in something short term. So, I mean, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, but I mean, that objective is definitely driving some of these calculations, right? The framework changes the math.
Yeah, that's important to note. So like most of the investment offerings that I participate in or that I offer to my investors or I want to offer to the investors is kind of a long-term cash flow, growing the value of the property over time, as well as fixing some immediate problems to force appreciation of the property quickly. So that only works if the long-term prospects for that market, that neighborhood, like we talked about, are good. However, there deals exist out there where it's more almost like a flip, and you're not necessarily as concerned about long-term job growth in something you only plan on having for 3 years. So yes, you want to make sure that it's not in a collapsing market, but if your business plan is to basically get in, fix a bunch of problems, renovate maybe, and then get out within a few years, you're not nearly as concerned about the long-term growth, appreciation of the property, rent growth over years and years. So in those cases, I'm less concerned with the kind of the business-friendly long-term growth prospects, and if I'm not targeting it for a long time, a development play, for instance, I'm not as concerned about what's going to happen 5-10 years down the road if I'm building it and going to sell it in a year and a half. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not only are the way in which we're approaching it, especially if it's a development thing, we're going to sell it, but it's just all about what's there and why it would be valuable to have it and someone would want it. Whereas if you're buying a long-term residential space, it's all about, well, will people want to live here? And
yes.
You can only do so much about that. Will people want to live here? You can have the most gorgeous apartments on the offering. And if you're in the middle of nowhere and all around you is just like, I don't know, cow farms and a sewage plant and something else, like you're not gonna really be selling a lot. So the cool factor goes up, right, with the amount of time we're going to stay there. I mean, people like examples, and you just made a terrible one comparing Tallahassee to Charlotte, so I'm going to give you another chance. Yeah, actually, I
have heard his feelings.
I always love something to be able to riff on. So, I mean, there are towns that have economic potential for something residential short term, but that maybe we don't want to necessarily be in long term because they don't seem to be making the investment in building up the area itself, right? if you will, the culture of the area.
Yeah,
So,
or even
I mean, we've
that
definitely
they're
talked
working
about,
on it, but they haven't got there yet. Like there's, for
yeah,
instance, there's some markets where you can tell that they're prioritizing it, but it takes a while to get to there. So I'd be either interested in either a very long-term deal in a place like that or a short-term deal in a place like that, because I know it's coming down the road, but also it's stable and it's heading the right direction. It may not be to where I want to put, buy a 250 unit complex right in the middle of it. I may not be ready to do that yet because it might take 5-10 years before the rent growth hits where I like to see. But a flip or something in that type of market is fine, because it's a stable, heading in the right direction kind of market to where you're not worried about the collapse while you're flipping this property.
yeah. I mean, and that's just if they're working on that, not only are they just working on like creating a cool spot and their reputation, but they're layering the sectors of their economy at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
because the cool factor makes jobs and takes jobs to create that, right? Which is why
Absolutely.
Savannah was such a great investment, because they've been a cool spot forever and
Mm-hmm.
a major port. I don't think a lot of people actually even know that. I think they hear Savannah and they think like idyllic southern town. You can walk around
Yeah.
with an open container.
With moss on the trees. It's one of the biggest ports.
Yeah, exactly. Spanish moss hanging out. I'm sure people not
Mm-hmm.
from the South assume cicadas are clacking at all times, not every 7 years, but yeah, and when in reality it's a major port on the East Coast. Yeah, as well. They've done both, which is a very cool thing to pull off. So we've talked about a lot of different things. I think one thing that we've kind of dabbled in but not really talked about, and that goes back to, are they working on creating a cool spot or not, is the governance of an area, whether that be a municipality, a county, a city, a township, or even the state. I mean, we are primarily in the South, that in of itself is kind of what we're talking about, but I mean, it varies from place to place. So how do we factor that in?
Yeah, so that's an important point to talk about. So on the back to kind of the macro side, one of the risks that's associated with residential real estate is, if you're going to be a landlord, is just the state and how their laws are written according to renters, that to govern that relationship between renters and landlords. And we invest in landlord friendly states, and it can seem harsh. In reality, it's a protection for the investors, because there are professional renters who know systems, and especially in certain cities where they can take advantage and exploit, landlords use the law to exploit. And basically the main thing I care about is being able to evict somebody for non-payment. um that's that's basically the bottom line of what I need to be able to do. There's some states where the timeline can be 6 months to a year to evict somebody for non-payment, and that's just a risk I'm not willing to take with investor money. And it can vary.
Well, actually, this is, yeah, what is a typical, like, down
The
here?
timeline.
I have no idea what it is in North Carolina. Yeah, I have no idea what it is in any other of these states.
It can be as quickly as a couple of weeks, depending on how quickly the state or the court system is running. In Mississippi, for instance, in Hattiesburg, we don't have to do it, and we don't use it, but it's nice to have in the event that we detect somebody's trying to take advantage of us. And all the protections still exist in terms of, you have to post notice. You can't just go into a renter's place. All those things exist. Basically, when I say landlord friendly states or markets, I'm concerned with the ability to evict non-paying people, and it needs to be able. I need to be able to do it in a month and a half to 2 months is kind of the time frame.
Right. So when you say a couple of weeks, you mean like once you start the process to the process being over, not like 2 weeks after they missed their first payment. You're like, you're out of here. You're not talking about that. You're talking about when
No,
you
I'm talking about the
decide to do it.
process.
It could take 2
Yes.
weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the
So
overall
when is
process
it?
is like 2 months from they didn't pay for a month. We give them till the next month. We post notice on them initially, when there's a date that they're late by, and we post on that date, whatever their lease says. And so if, the next month, if they haven't paid or don't have a plan to pay, we're like, okay, well, we have to continue proceedings now. And then eventually, if they don't make it up, there's a court judgment. Hey, you got to pay this. And if they don't, then 2 weeks after that, we can take possession usually. So it's like a 2 month process to get somebody out, and they have time. And the sheriff will get involved and like post notice on the door. Then they'll move them out a few days after that kind of thing. But basically, there's some municipalities and states where that process is way longer, and that's a huge risk to operations and to cash flow. Really.
So we're talking they haven't paid after 2 months of non-payment, then things really start getting kicked off.
They need to be moving out, or like, and I'd rather people move out without being evicted. If something happens and you lose a job, we get it, we understand. I'd rather not have to, because once you get an eviction on your record as a renter, you're in serious trouble to rent again.
Mm-hmm.
So, we try to work with everybody. Say, hey, we don't want to push this button. If you need to leave because you can't afford to pay and you need to, move in with some friends or family while you get, till you get a new job, understood. It happens. Life happens. But some people just don't take us up on that.
Yeah. Well, I have actually a lot of other follow-ups on that, but that's not really part of this podcast. I think it's good to note that when Matthias is talking, you hear landlord friendly and you start thinking, is this going to date me if I say this? You start thinking Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life. I don't know. Does that date me? I mean, it's a classic. It's on every Christmas.
It probably does.
I'm just knocking my mic off over here. I guess, I don't know. I can't think of what's another example of an evil landlord. That's just like the biggest one. Pottersville.
Yeah.
That's more slumlord than evil landlord, but
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. I'm at a loss for, this trope. Yeah, I know. That's interesting. I guess I should feel ashamed that I can't pull another literary character out of my hat, but whatever.
It's on you.
Okay. Well, I think, it is on me. I'm looking at my notes here and I feel like we have covered most of this, but I have one just kind of last. So,
okay.
And it's based on just personal anecdotal stuff. So my parents live in Black Mountain, North Carolina, outside of Asheville, which is, a lot of people may know Asheville. But if you don't, it's in the mountains. It's very pretty, and it's decent amount of the area is for retirees who want to retire to a beautiful place. And where my parents live is a place that is growing primarily because of retirees, and they're building apartment complexes in Swananoa, or Swananowhere, as we used to call it. But I mean, what's our approach on population, money growth? That's not really job growth. That's just like money growth. Like, should we be buying some, what do they call those things? Assisted living? Like
some people are doing
those things are
sure.
big. Those are big money.
Oh yeah.
It's just interesting.
They're not going anywhere.
That area where I grew up is changing.
Yeah, I think a place like that, Asheville's a good enough anchor so that I would be interested in, some of those. Basically, I would call it extended Asheville, basically, type market. So that would be interesting. I'd have to, that particular one, I haven't done any research on what's going on over there, but absolutely. I mean, especially if it's in the path of progress, like you're saying, where they're building up and they're bringing new, once they start getting, bigger service centers, like a nice grocery store, a nice all the nice restaurants and stuff like that. That's a pretty good indicator. A lot of times, a lot of people, hey, if they build a Starbucks, you're like, okay, Starbucks is research. They pay gazillions of dollars all the time to do research on demographics and growth trends and things like that. I mean, if there's a Starbucks around the corner, I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty confident that everybody thinks this place is growing rapidly. It kind of confirms my analysis of a And it's like, hey, I'll piggyback on their research.
Heck yeah. And if there's a Starbucks in a parking lot shopping center with an upscale grocery store, then you're doubling down. They start getting those like fancy food fast stores, not fast food, but food fast. That's another big one.
Yeah.
So Asheville's funny because it also got a bunch of breweries, right? Like New Belgium moved across the country. It has all those kind of big plants as well, but it's it's an influx of cash without necessarily an influx of jobs that then drives jobs. So that's just a kind of interesting twist on the calculus there. But you know what? I think that's probably enough from us for today. Don't want to wear out our welcome on these radios and screens. We'll be back next week. Topic to be determined. I'm sure it'll be riveting. But for us here at Get Invested, we're going to get out of here and really appreciate you hanging with us to talk about market entry research. I'm Jordan. That's Matthias, and we'll talk to you later.
Cheers.